Let us pray. May the words of our lips and the meditations of our hearts be always acceptable to you, O Lord, our strength and our redeemer. Amen. So, anybody was shopping today? Was shopping this morning? No? No? This week? This month? This year? I'm sure you all got something, right? You're out shopping, whatever. I went every morning, every Sunday morning, I go shopping, I guess, right? Gotta get my cup of coffee at 7-Eleven, and then like some cake or whatnot, or some cupcakes or whatever. I know, I'm the worst, aren't I? And usually, like, that's not a long one, but I do have one that's semi-long, right? That comes from every time I go shopping. Right? These things are getting so big that like you could write the Magna Carta on them. Because besides getting the stuff that you go for, you always get a receipt, don't you? And do you keep them? Do you check your receipts? Like even though they save you everything, save your receipt. Right as you're going out, whether it's Home Depot or ShopRite, 7-Eleven or Quick Check, do you want your receipt? And most of us are like, yeah, whatever. We kind of throw it away. Or, I don't know, does anybody have like the reused bags? And there's hundreds of receipts at the bottom from wherever you go. ShopRite, Whole Foods, wherever it is that you go, Stop and Shop, anything like that. They become like, we don't like see them. We kind of like toss them out, don't we? Because it's like, what's the big deal? What's on a receipt? But what if we took a moment to pause and think about those receipts? What's on there? It's a list. It's a diary of all the things that you've bought, isn't it? But there's two things to think about. First, we should think about, if it's like a food store, those nourishing items that are on there. We read about the this and the that, the fruits and the vegetables, the grains and the meat, the eggs and the potatoes, and all that stuff is on there. And we buy those things to nourish our bodies, to keep us strong, to keep us whole, to keep us complete. Because if we didn't buy any food, or we didn't have any food, or we didn't eat any food, we would die, right? For the most part. I don't know, maybe somebody here knows how you can live without food, but I'm not just talking about, oh my goodness, I really need my, I died, I want my pretzels, something like that. It's all that stuff that we need, so it matters, it nourishes us. It keeps us strong. It keeps us whole. But what else is in the diary of that receipt? I mean, there's some kind of exchange going on there, isn't it? You get that receipt because you've purchased something. You get that receipt because you've given money and you've gotten stuff. And if you look at the left side, it usually has all the stuff. But on the right side, it has all the numbers, all the dollars that you've spent. But how did you get those dollars? What if we took a moment to think about it? Because those dollars, that receipt, is not only a diary of what keeps you alive, but a diary of what you've done to get that stuff. And it usually comes from work. Whether we're working right now, or we're retired, we worked in the past, we've had to do something to get that stuff. And so that becomes not only the diary of the things that we eat, but the things that we've done, isn't it? When we start to think about, I've exchanged this many hours of my life to get this much money to buy this stuff to sustain me, to sustain my family, and to sustain my friends when they come over, and all those people that I love. But I've given them my best effort. I've given my heart and my soul and my energy into working to get there. I've given my greatest creativity. I've given the best years of my life. I've given my time and my attention. I've given more than I've gotten back. Does that all kind of come out in that receipt too? Because sometimes we really love what we do at work. We really enjoy, we're passionate about it. And sometimes we're not. Sometimes work is a slog. It's a treadmill. I cannot believe that there's another meeting that I have to sit through, and we're going to talk about the same thing, and the result is going to be the same. My time is valuable. What I would do without going to that meeting, I don't know, but my time is valuable. So when we start to think about this, that receipt that we so easily whip at the bottom of that bag and toss into the back of your trunk, and you only see it again when you're like digging through the bags again, when you're at the line and they're you're putting all those out. It becomes like forgotten. But if we pause and we think about it, it is important, isn't it? That thing that we throw at the bottom has some semblance to our life. There's something else that has kind of like become ubiquitous, hasn't it? Like the receipt, you see it everywhere, it's in the background, but we kind of forgot what it means. Paul talks about it today, it's the cross, isn't it? Turn on TV, look at the internet, walk down the street, and folks have crosses on, don't they? All kinds of stuff. They're tricked out sometimes, bedazzled, bejeweled, right? They're in our earrings, they're on our necklaces, there's one up there. But sometimes there's so many that they've kind of lost what they mean. They lost what they mean because ultimately, if we go back to what the cross was, that'd be like wearing a noose around your neck. A little picture of an electric chair, just like on a magnet on your car, if you thought about it for a moment. Because ultimately, that is exactly the message that the first Christians were trying to hold on to. In the midst of Rome, they were showing that they were weak and humble. In the midst of Judaism, they were saying that they were accursed. It's actually in Deuteronomy, I think it's 23:21, that says that those that hang on the tree are accursed. The Romans didn't put everybody on the cross. It wasn't like, I don't know, you jaywalked and you got the cross. They saved this for the worst kind of bandits, troublemakers, and outlaws. They got the cross. So if you were having the cross hanging on you, what it really meant was that you were hanging on the cross. So why would they pick that? Of all the things, why not the star that meant at the birth of Christ? Why not something cool? Why not something that garnered the feeling of power, prestige, something? But they stuck with the cross. And Paul kind of like sticks with the cross too when he writes to the Corinthians. He writes this, he says, "For the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God." When Christians look at or even wear a cross, it's a sign that allows us to examine the very real way, the details of how Christ wanted us to live our lives. What's the victory in that? To be humble, to be meek, to take it, to be there for the least, the last, and the lost. You know, sometimes we have clues when we're like little kids, when we become bigger kids, like first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, eighth grade. We outgrow those clothes, don't we? As adults, unfortunately, we outgrow our clothes too. And sometimes we're not as proud of graduating to the next size. Why hasn't the church outgrown the cross? Or why has the church outgrown the cross? You see, if we think about the cross in terms of how it was originally manifested for us, it's about trying to get the bottom position every time. to be taken advantage of at every turn, to give all that we have for something we're not sure of. I mentioned faith before. Faith is not a surety. Faith is surrounded by doubt and unsureness. And have I outgrown this? And what does it have for me? And the answer, I hope and I pray, is that we haven't outgrown it at all. It's that what we do every day is bigger than who we are at every turn. It's that when we can have our worst moments, we can find a glimmer of joy in our hearts and in our minds and in our souls. You see, the cross says that there's no pretension. It's not about who I am. It's about who God is. The gospel reading today comes from John. The gospel of St. John, right? And so, in the days in which that was written, the guy who wrote that gospel, he lived at a time where good Jewish people read the Torah, which is the first 5 books of the Bible, right? And then they would read the prophets, and then they would read the history books, and then they would read the wisdom books. And the story was that you had to have the Torah memorized. Could you imagine for a minute if Chris didn't come up here and read that scripture reading? He just started talking because he had it memorized. But then he stopped mid-sentence and he pointed to you. And you could pick it up just like that because you studied it over and over and over again. You had it memorized over and over and over so that you knew it word for word, every piece. So the saying was that if you knew it so well, that people didn't even see you. That you were so into the Old Testament that all they saw were the words. So the saying was, the flesh became the word. Do we know that? Is there a quizzical moment where we're going, wait, the flesh became the word? The flesh became the... That's backwards, isn't it? Because John, right, in the Gospel, chapter 1, verse 14 writes, the Word became the flesh and lived among us. You see, it was this flipping things upside down that was the story that Jesus is kind of telling everybody. And it's the recordings of the gospel writers over and over again. It's no longer going to be the way we think it is. It's no longer about becoming the Word. It's about becoming the Word. It's about incarnation. It's about I'm no longer going to do the law. I'm no longer going to go, hey, you know what? Don't listen to me. Don't care about who I am as a human being. Care about what I know. What are the facts? What's the information? See, I got the book. And Jesus says, there's no joy in that. There's no love in that. There's no peace in that. I'm turning this upside down. I'm flipping the tables because it's eating at me. Do we ever have those moments when it's eating at us? When it's bothering us? When we're stressed and strained? It's okay. It's Waterloo. We're a little stressed and strained. We've been through a little stress and strain lately, haven't we? The question is, what does that cross mean to us? Does the cross mean that it's about me, or does the cross mean that it's about God? And that we're going to flip things upside down. Is there a newness that can be drawn from this? Is there fresh water that can be pulled from that well? Is there a new kind of love that we've forgotten that we're going to get back to? Does the Word become flesh, or does the flesh become the Word? Do we follow Christ and start to be the Word that becomes the flesh? That it's not about Do I have the Bible memorized? But do I have the love in my heart? It fills me so much. I was following a car the other day that had a bumper sticker on it. And it was a paw. Does anybody ever see those? Does anybody ever know what they're for? Anyone want to throw out the gas?
I think it's some football thing, isn't it?
What's that?
It's football or something?
No, not football. No, they're all over, and it's from, it's when people get dogs, they get cats, and it's for what? Rescue, right? But this one's message was very interesting. It said, who rescued who? Who rescued who? Which makes us stop and ponder the cross. Because if that's the case, if the one who is wounded is healing, if the one who's in need is helping, if the one who is desperate is changing the one who is the bringer of something, we have to wonder about our own lives. There's a story about this Episcopal priest, and she worked in a major city. Her name was Martha Stone. And she talked about how she had this winter retreat, so it was only open like a couple of months. And so they would bring folks in with all kinds of problems, but only for a couple of months, because the rest of the time was totally fine. And so they transitioned it to an addiction recovery center. And so she said, here's the funny thing about this. When we first started, we were filled with